Moving into a new place was meant to be a fresh start, a chance to leave behind all the chaos of my past and finally create something new for myself. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. But everything shifted when I met that handyman. The house I moved into was old yet charming, a fixer-upper with enough personality to make me believe I could turn it into a home. However, the reality of home repairs hit me harder than I expected. I had barely unpacked when the first issue arose. The kitchen sink wouldn't stop leaking, no matter how much I twisted the faucet or tightened the knobs, as I desperately pretended to know what I was doing. Water trickled persistently into the basin, almost mocking me. To make matters worse, the bathroom light flickered ominously, and one of the windows refused to shut properly. So much for a fresh start. Frustrated and out of options, I did what any confused new homeowner would do. I called a handyman. It was my first time hiring someone for this kind of work, and I had no clue what to expect. When I opened the door that afternoon, I certainly didn't expect him. He stood on my porch with a toolbox in hand, dressed in worn jeans and a fitted black t-shirt that hugged his broad chest. He looked like he stepped out of a gritty movie, strong, confident, and completely at ease. His dark hair was slightly messy, the kind that looked effortlessly good, and when he glanced up at me, his deep-set eyes held a glimmer of something unreadable. "You're the new guy, right?" His voice was smooth, showcasing the laid-back confidence of someone experienced. I blinked, trying to remember how to form words. Yeah, just moved in a few days ago." He shifted the toolbox to his other hand. "Welcome to the neighborhood. You called about a leak?" I cleared my throat and stepped aside for him to enter. "Yeah, kitchen sink, and maybe a few other things while you're here." He walked past me, bringing with him the scent of sawdust and a hint of something. Clean and subtly masculine, surprisingly distracting. I followed him into the kitchen, doing my best not to overthink how effortlessly his presence filled the space. "Guess the place came with some surprises, huh?" he mused, crouching down to inspect the pipes beneath the sink. I chuckled, leaning against the counter. "More than I bargained for. The faucet's been dripping since I moved in." I tried fixing it myself, I gestured helplessly. He looked up, a smirk forming at the corner of his lips. "Let me guess, YouTube tutorial?" I scoffed. "What? Like that's not a totally legitimate way to learn plumbing?" His smirk transformed into a grin that sent a flutter through me. "Yeah, sure, until you end up flooding your kitchen." I rolled my eyes but couldn't hold back a small smile. There was something about his relaxed confidence that made it hard not to react. He returned to his work, the muscles in his forearms slightly flexing as he adjusted a wrench. "So," he said casually after a moment, "why this town? What made you move here?" I hesitated, caught off guard by the question. Most people didn't ask, at least not in such a genuinely curious way. "Needed a change," I finally said. "Wanted some peace and quiet. The city was too much." He simply nodded, as if he understood. "Yeah, I get that." Something about his tone made me wonder what his story was, but before I could ask, he gave the pipe one last turn and sat back on his heels. "That should do it," he said, standing up and running the faucet. The water flowed smoothly, no more leak. "I'll check out the other things while I'm here." "Thanks. I really appreciate it," I replied sincerely. As he moved around the house, fixing the flickering light and checking the stubborn window, we kept chatting. He introduced himself as Alex and mentioned he had been doing handyman work around town for a few years. It didn't surprise me. He had that kind of presence people probably remembered long after he left. The conversation was light and easy, but there lingered a subtle tension we didn't address directly. I noticed him looking at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention, the way his fingers brushed against mine briefly when I handed him a tool, and how my pulse quickened whenever he moved closer, like my body was reacting before my mind could catch up. By the time he finished, the house felt more peaceful, yet the air was heavy with something unspoken. He packed up his tools, stretching slightly as he glanced at me. "Shouldn't have too many more problems now," he said, "but you know with houses like this, things tend to act up. Wouldn't be surprised if you need me again soon." The way he said it was casual but tinged with something else that made my throat go dry. Right, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Well, thanks again for everything. He nodded, his gaze lingering just a second too long before he finally turned toward the door. See you around, new guy. And then he was gone, leaving me standing in my newly repaired house with my heart racing for no good reason. I told myself it was nothing, just a routine service call. But deep down, I already knew better. This wasn't the last I'd see of him. The next time he came over, I sensed things wouldn't be nearly as straightforward. The house was in good shape now, everything Alex had fixed was working perfectly. And yet, something felt off. It wasn't about the leaky faucet or the flickering light, those issues were finally resolved. It was the silence. I reminded myself that this was the reason I moved here, to escape the constant noise of the city. But ever since Alex had walked out of my door days ago, the place felt too quiet. I caught myself thinking about him more than I wanted to admit, his easy confidence, the way his shirt clung to his chest when he stretched, the grin he gave me before leaving. I told myself I was being ridiculous. That's what I kept insisting, but just then, as if the universe had been listening in on my thoughts, something else in the house. I found myself in a bit of a predicament with my heater. It was working perfectly all night until it suddenly started making a noise that sounded like it was about to explode. So, I had no choice but to reach for my phone and scroll to the contact I saved as Alex the Handyman. I paused for a moment, wondering if he'd think I was just calling to see him again, but I brushed that thought aside and hit the dial button. It rang twice before his smooth and slightly amused voice came through the line, asking if I missed him already. I let out a sharp breath, feeling a mix of irritation and a hint of amusement. I explained that my heater seemed to be making death threats, hence the call to the only guy in town who could help. He chuckled and replied, "That bad, huh? Let's see for ourselves." He promptly said he would come by. He didn't even need my address again, he remembered it. Alec arrived faster than I expected, toolbox in hand, with his sleeves rolled up enough to show off his strong forearms. I told myself not to stare. He knocked once and then confidently pushed the door open, stepping inside like he belonged. "So where's the patient?" he asked. I led him to the heater, crossing my arms as I watched him inspect it. "Think you can fix it?" I asked. He looked up with a smirk. "That's why you called me, isn't it?" I rolled my eyes, but before I could respond, the heater let out a loud groan that made me flinch. Alex grinned and said, all right, I see your point." He crouched down to grab a wrench from his toolbox. I stood there watching him work, a bit distracted by how he moved. He suddenly looked up with a teasing remark about my silence. Caught off guard, I blinked and he continued, "Last time you were full of questions. Getting tired of me already?" I scoffed and deflected that I just wanted him to do his job without interruption. His grin widened. "Or maybe you're just nervous around me." I admit, there was a certain tension in the air as he pointed out how I got stiff when he was too close for comfort. I opened my mouth to argue but realized he wasn't exactly wrong. His gaze dropped to my crossed arms for a moment before he stood far too close for comfort, forcing me to tilt my head up to meet his eyes. My heart started racing a bit, and he asked if I was always so wound up. I could barely respond and quipped back, "You're always so full of yourself." His smirk deepened at my reply, and the air between us felt electric, charged with unspoken words. Just then, his hand brushed mine, warm and solid, not rushed at all. I inhaled sharply, but before I could react, the heater made one last noise and then shut off abruptly. Alex chuckled, breaking the moment. "Well, that's one way to get it to stop." So, I forced myself to blink and act as if I hadn't just been breathless. "Yeah, lucky timing," I mumbled, clearing my throat. With a knowing look, Alex made some final adjustments before standing up. "Should be good now. If anything else breaks, you know who to call." I caught his implication, but was unsure how to respond. As he grabbed his toolbox and paused at the door, the nervous flutter in my stomach resurfaced. He softened his tone, saying, "You don't have to act like nothing's there." I frowned, asking what he meant, and after a moment of contemplation, he smirked, saying, "Never mind. See you around, new guy." And just like that, he was gone. I stared at the closed door for quite a while, my hands still tingling from where he had touched mine. I wanted to brush it off as nothing, but deep down, I knew this wasn't over. It had only been 2 days since Alex had last come over, and I couldn't shake the awareness of that. I found myself glancing at my phone, half expecting another convenient reason to see him. But my heater was fine, the sink hadn't been leaking, and everything else around the house was finally working as it should, except for me. I couldn't stop thinking about him, recalling how close he stood, how his hand had brushed against mine, and the way he looked at me like he knew something I wasn't ready to admit. In all honesty, I'm not usually the type to act on impulse. I prefer control and logic, knowing where things were headed, but Alex was different. He wasn't part of my plan, yet I found myself dialing his number anyway. When he answered, his voice was smooth with amusement, asking if I missed him again. I hesitated, second-guessing myself, and said, "I just wondered if you wanted to come by since you've been here twice now. Thought I'd return the favor." There was a moment of silence before he asked if I was inviting him over for drinks. It sounded silly when he said it, but I didn't back down, teasing him, "Unless you have better plans." He chuckled knowingly, "All right, I'll be there in 20. I had no idea what I was doing and never thought I'd be taking a leap like this. By the time he knocked on my door, my nerves were a bundle of tension. I'd changed shirts twice and debated lighting a candle, ultimately settling on just opening a bottle of whiskey. When Alex walked in, it felt like he'd been in this space countless times before, his casual vibe taking over as he looked around. He wore dark jeans and a plain white t-shirt that somehow made him even more attractive. Noticing the whiskey on the counter, he smirked, "Didn't peg you for the drinking type." I shrugged, pouring 2 glasses. As he took a seat on the couch, he watched me pour and asked what the occasion was. I handed him a glass, avoiding his gaze, explaining it was just a chance for us to talk, beyond talking about broken things. His lips twitched, but he took a sip. "All right, let's talk." At first, it was easy, a conversation flowed casually as we discussed the town and how he ended up as a handyman. He shared stories of his childhood here, expressing his love for working with his hands and how he had no patience for stuffy offices or desks. "I like fixing things," he said, rolling the glass between his palms. "I like knowing that something's broken and by the time I leave, it isn't anymore." I nodded, understanding that feeling. He looked at me thoughtfully, his gaze lingering as he questioned, "You don't strike me as the type to move out here just for peace and quiet. Feels like you're running from something." Suddenly, my chest tightened as I considered my response. "I just needed a change," I replied. He hummed softly, clearly skeptical but didn't push further. Instead, he leaned back on the couch, stretching his arm across its back. I hesitated. The town was nice, the house was lovely, but the only thing that truly made it feel alive was the person sitting right next to me. I finally admitted to myself that it was growing on me. Alex smirked, and I nodded while taking a sip of whiskey. The warmth curled in my stomach, but it wasn't just from the alcohol, it was him, his presence, his closeness. The air between us began to shift, thickening with something unspoken. I sensed it, he sensed it. Then, he did something small yet impactful. He reached for my glass. His fingers brushed against mine while he took it, slow and deliberate. His thumb barely grazed my wrist, but the reaction was instantaneous. My breath hitched, and my pulse quickened. He caught on, his eyes flickering up to mine as his teasing smirk faded into something deeper, more intense. "Why do you do that?" he murmured. I swallowed and asked, "Do what?" His hand lingered on my glass, warmth radiating from his skin. He spoke softly yet intensely, "Every time I get close, you freeze. You look at me like you're waiting for something, but then you hold back." I could barely breathe. "Tell me I'm wrong," he challenged. I couldn't because he compelled me to say otherwise. I should have pulled away, should have said something sharp to break the tension. Instead, I leaned in. It was just a small movement, barely noticeable, but it was all Alex needed. He closed the space between us before I could second-guess myself, and suddenly his lips were on mine. The world tilted. I barely had time to react as heat engulfed me. His hands slid to the back of my neck, fingers threading into my hair. He kissed me like he had been waiting for this, as if he knew I had to. I exhaled against him, and that was all it took for him to deepen the kiss, tilting my head and taking control. I let him. I wanted him to. The whiskey felt warm, but he felt even hotter, his body pressed against mine, hands sliding down my side, his breath heavy against my lips. I barely realized we were moving until my back hit the couch, until he was over me. The weight of him was solid and undeniable, making every thought vanish. His hands roamed over my ribs, waist, and hem of my shirt, and he didn't rush. He simply waited. I could have stopped it, but I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I reached up, my fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. He groaned against my mouth, low and deep, and something within me broke. I wasn't thinking anymore, I wasn't overanalyzing. I was just feeling, wanting, taking. For the first time in a long time, I let myself have something real. Alex's breath was uneven against my skin, his fingers gripping my waist like he was barely holding back. I didn't want him to hold back. My hands roamed over his shoulders and back, tugging him closer, anchoring myself to him as if he were the only solid thing in the world. But just as I surrendered to him, something inside me wavered, a flicker of doubt, a whisper of caution. This was happening quickly, too quickly. My breathing hitched when his lips found my collarbone, and suddenly the weight of it all, the intensity, the hunger, the reality of our connection, crashed into me all at once. I tensed, and Alex felt it immediately. He paused, his lips lingering against my skin for a brief moment before pulling back slightly to search my eyes, concern evident in his dark gaze. "What's wrong?" His voice was low and husky, but there was something more, concern. I exhaled unsteadily, my heart hammering. I didn't know what to say. I wanted this, I wanted him, but some part of me was hesitant. Maybe it was fear or the reality of what this meant. I had spent so long avoiding this, convincing myself I wasn't the kind of person who let someone in like this. Alex's jaw tightened as he watched me, his hands holding my hips firmly. "Are you going to pull away again?" I opened my mouth, but no words came. He let out a slow breath, his fingers flexing against my skin. "You always do this, don't you?" My brows furrowed. "Do what?" He tilted his head slightly, his gaze unreadable. "You run." My stomach twisted. "I don't, you do," he interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. "You called me here. You wanted me here, but now that I'm here, now that you have me." He studied me closely. "You're scared." My pulse raced in response. "I'm not scared," I mumbled, but the words felt empty, even to me. Alex let out a dry chuckle, shaking his head. I stiffened as his grip on my waist tightened just enough to send a shiver down my spine. His expression turned serious, making my breath hitch. "Tell me I'm wrong," he challenged. I clenched my jaw, my throat tight. His lips parted as if he was about to say something more but decided against it. Instead, he shifted, moving off me just enough that I felt the loss of his warmth instantly. The space between us now felt vast, like a canyon. He rubbed a hand over his face, exhaling sharply. "You can't keep doing this," he muttered softly. "Doing what?" I asked, confusion mixing with dread. Alex's gaze locked onto mine, a raw frustration burning there. "Acting like you don't want this." I swallowed. "I never said, you don't have to say it, but I feel it every time I touch you. Every time you look at me like you're about to lose your mind but can't bring yourself to stop." I opened my mouth, wanting to argue, but I found no words. Alex stared at me, his jaw tight, fingers digging into his thighs as if holding himself back. Then, without warning, he moved. One moment he was on the edge of the couch, the next, he was hovering over me. His hands braced on either side of my head, his body so close I could feel the heat radiating from him. I inhaled sharply as he didn't touch me, not yet. His lips brushed close to mine. "Tell me to stop," he murmured. "Tell me to walk out that door, and I will." My chest rose and fell as my pulse raced. His fingers curled into the couch cushions, knuckles white. "Say it," he pressed, his voice tight, controlled. "Tell me you don't want this, and I'll go." I looked up at him, my body trembling, not with fear, but something deeper. I couldn't say it because it would be a lie. I sensed his disappointment when he saw my silence. "That's what I thought," he said before his lips crashed against mine. This time, it wasn't soft. It was passionate, fire-filled, a claim. His hands moved purposefully, one in my hair, tilting my head back, the other gripping my waist, grounding me against him. A soft sound escaped me, a mix of a gasp and a whimper, but he swallowed it, deepening the kiss, demanding everything I had left to give. I clung to him, fingers digging into his back as I melted into him, finally releasing all hesitation and fear. There was only us, and for the first time, I wasn't running, I was exactly where I wanted to be. We shared something magical, something unreal. The room remained still, the dim glow from streetlights casting faint shadows across the walls. My breath slowed, my body sinking into the warmth of the sheets, but my mind was racing. Alex lay beside me, relaxed, his chest rising and falling evenly, one arm resting casually across his stomach. He seemed completely at ease, as if this was all normal, but for me, it was anything but. I turned slightly to watch him in the quiet. What now? This moment had been inevitable, the connection. Connection between us impossible to ignore. But now that the fire had burned out everything else, now that I had let myself fall without hesitation, I was left standing at the edge of something daunting. What if this was just a passing thing for him? What if it was simply another way to pass the time? I swallowed, my throat tightening. Alex had always seemed casual, as if nothing fazed him. Maybe I was just another fleeting distraction in his life, while I was already overthinking everything. I turned onto my side, trying to calm the storm brewing in my head, but I could feel him moving. I sensed his gaze on me before he spoke. "You're thinking too hard." I stiffened. "I'm not," I replied, clearly lying. He reached out, fingers brushing against my arm cautiously. "You're doing that thing where you try to convince yourself this isn't real." My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to deny it, to push him away, but I couldn't. Because he was right. I exhaled sharply, forcing myself to sit up. "Look, Alex, I don't know what this is for you, but..." He interrupted, sitting up as well, frustration evident. "Don't do that." I turned to face him. "Do what?" He held my gaze, unwavering. "Act like this doesn't mean anything." I swallowed hard. "Does it?" His jaw tightened as he searched my eyes. After a long pause, he ran a hand through his hair, letting out a breath. "Do you really think I keep coming back just because your house is falling apart?" His voice softened, revealing a glimpse of vulnerability hidden beneath his usual confidence. I stared at him, pulse racing. He shook his head, a small amused breath escaping. "You really don't get it, do you?" I stayed silent, waiting. Alex shifted closer, fingertips reaching for mine, touch hesitant yet firm. "I didn't have to take these jobs. I could have passed them off to someone else. I could have made excuses, I could have let you figure this out on your own. But I didn't. I wanted to be here." Something inside me cracked as I stared down at our entwined hands, my breath shaky. "Why?" Alex chuckled softly, shaking his head as if the answer was obvious. "Because you're different. The first time I stepped into your house, you looked at me like I was where you didn't want to be. But the moment I got close, when I took a step in, you didn't pull away." His grip tightened on my hand, making sure I understood. "You drive me crazy. You act like you don't want me, like you're scared of where this could lead, yet you let me in every time." He tilted his head, his gaze steady. "And I keep coming back because I want more, from you." My chest ached at the weight of his words. I shook my head, trying to comprehend everything. Alex, You don't have to say anything, he interrupted, fingers intertwining with mine. But you do have to make a choice. I swallowed hard as he studied me, expression inscrutable. Then, in a slow, deliberate movement, he leaned in, his lips brushing against my temple. You can keep running, he murmured against my skin, you can keep pretending this was just a mistake, that it doesn't mean anything. He pulled back slightly, allowing me to see his steady gaze. Or you can take a chance on something real. My throat tightened. I wanted to take that leap, I wanted to believe this wasn't just a fleeting moment. But the fear still lingered. Alex must have sensed my apprehension. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his jaw. You don't have to decide right now, he said, though I could tell it was effortful to admit. But don't lie to yourself. He shifted off the bed, reaching for his shirt and pulling it over his head. My heart raced as I watched him. You're leaving? I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. He paused, fingers hovering over his jeans buttons, glancing back at me. Do you want me to stay? It felt like an unspoken question hung between us, thick with unresolved emotions. Reflecting on the past weeks, I remembered how his presence filled the silence, how he challenged me, how he made me feel something after so long of feeling nothing. I didn't want to return to that emptiness. I was sure now, so instead of responding verbally, I reached for him. Before he could react, I pulled him down, our lips meeting in a slow, profound kiss. His body tensed momentarily before he surrendered, hands settling on my waist, breath shaky against my cheek. I could feel how tightly he held on to this moment like he'd been waiting for it. When we broke apart, our foreheads resting against each other, breaths warm and uneven, I steadied myself, heart racing. Stay, I whispered. Alex exhaled, wrapping his arms fully around me, drawing me close. Yeah, he murmured, pressing a slow kiss against my temple. I can do that. And for the first time, I felt unafraid. I didn't know what this was or where it was heading, but I was certain of one thing, I wanted it. And for now, that was enough. But soon, the reality of what we had done washed over me, the culmination of everything we had been heading toward crashed around me. What now? Alex's gaze remained steady as he traced patterns along my arm, grounding me. You're thinking too much again, he said. I swallowed, trying to push past the knot in my throat. I don't know where this leaves us. He exhaled, shaking his head slightly. We'll figure it out. I let out a quiet, breathless laugh, devoid of humor. You say that like it's easy. He smirked, although there was something softer in his expression. Nothing about this is easy, but that doesn't mean it's not worth it. His words settled deep within me, wrapping around my ribs, making it hard to breathe. I wanted to believe him. I hoped we could navigate this uncertainty and create something genuine from it. But the truth was, I had no idea how. The outside world wouldn't understand, we never did. If we let ourselves fall too deeply, where would we end up? Two people caught in something we couldn't control. But I was convinced this wasn't a mistake. I glanced at him, my chest tightening. What if we regret this? Alex's expression didn't waver, almost resolute. Do you? I opened my mouth, then closed it. I couldn't lie, I didn't regret it. He nodded, as if he already knew. Then let's take it one step at a time. I inhaled sharply, tension thick between us. Would I choose to walk away before it was too late, or take the risk, knowing the world might not embrace us? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, because right now, I'm just figuring it all out.